All right, we're live. SCMP MMA Live Chat Q&A. Another week, another dollar, earned or lost, whatever way you want to look at it. Today, man, we got Shingo, the man behind the mirror, so to say, at Rizin. A lot of people don't know who Shingo is. A lot of people know who Shingo is, but today you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn who this man is. And yeah, man, Shingo, thank you so much for coming on, man, and doing this, because I know you don't really do too much like media. So it's an honor.
Yeah, John, thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm excited. I think this is actually my first time doing anything like this. I usually do translating, but yeah, for me, actually talking about myself and giving my opinions, I think it's the first time. So I'm gonna try to pick my words.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And the people that are, jumping in on the chat and stuff, anything to do with Asian MMA, Japanese MMA, Korean MMA, Chinese MMA, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, ask away, because we'll give our viewpoints on all of that stuff. Um, First off, like, what I wanted to talk about is just getting to know you, Shingo, and like your background, and how did you end up with Ryzen, and just what is your role with Ryzen, and stuff like that. So let's start with the background, man, because you are from the States.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Chicago, and I came back to Japan when I was 10. And I spent all my teenage years in Japan, learning about the culture and um, but yeah, for some I don't know, I don't remember what it was, but I decided to go back to the States to just kind of have fun with my life. Japanese people are just all so serious all the time, and you gotta study, you gotta work, and they're just so uptight. So yeah, I think I was like, my brother got married in California, so I used that opportunity to quit my job, and then I flew out to California just kind of unwind. And it's just so random, and I ended up becoming friends with the King of the Cage owner, Terry Trebelcock, and yeah, that's where it all started. He got me into King of the Cage, and by the time I knew it, I was working for King of the Cage, and after a few years, he put me in charge of regional shows, and I started running shows in the West Coast, and just so many things happened, and so I've done King of the Cage, went to Shark Fights, and then I was booking fighters for Suto in Japan. Then I came back to Japan, helped launch VTJ series, which is like it was like a form of Valley Tudo Japan, but in a cage now. So I helped that out, and then that kind of led to me helping out UFC Japan. Um, and after the 2015 UFC Japan show, I was kind of, I got the opportunity to work with Rizin, and here I am. It's been a crazy journey so far.
Yeah, man, you've dabbled and dipped into many different promotions, and one thing that like we have in common is that we both like grew up in the States, so our mindset like is like Americanized, you know what
Oh
I
yeah,
mean? And then we both live in our home country.
yeah,
We went back later on in our lives, and in myself too, man. When I was younger, I was actually born in Korea. Then I went to the States when I was really young, and then I came back in like my elementary years, and then I went back to the States and lived there, and then came back later on. So the mindset is different from like you other Japanese, me like other Koreans. So you're kind of like stuck in the middle. Do you feel that sometimes when you're living in Japan, like being stuck in the middle?
oh totally. I mean, my boss Sakakibara-san, right? When he introduces me to other Japanese people, he's like, "Oh, this guy's American. He's not Japanese." So don't get offended if he says something rude because this guy's American.
I get that all the time too, man. Like people say like they'll try to make excuses for you, like because you're
Yeah,
not fully like part of the culture, but you're Japanese, man. Like your blood is Japanese, full blood. Me, like myself, I'm full blooded Korean. But yeah, it's like it's weird, man. I never talked to anybody about this openly, but like I am stuck in the middle. You know what I mean? Like you're not really fully accepted by either side, right? And it is a weird position, but it also gives you the advantage, right, with dealing with like
oh, for
foreign
sure,
fighters.
for sure. It's nothing but an advantage. Just I think it's a full-on advantage, and I'm very fortunate to have this privilege, I think. And obviously you see both cultures, you understand both sides, so I think you can just kind of adjust better in terms of different cultures.
For sure, man. Now, before we get into the Rizin Bantamweight Grand Prix and the backstory on that and preview some of the fights, we got some questions, man. So we'll get into some of these questions, and we'll go with Drake first. You know what I mean? Drake is over here. This is the first question from Alex Box Uno. He says, "What Rizin show you recommend watching for a newcomer to Rizin? As I really only started watching highlights of Jerry." Alex Box Uno. He says, "What Rizin show you recommend watching for a newcomer to Rizin? As I really only started watching highlights of Jerry." Alex,
I have no idea. Threw me off there. Anyway, what is the best Rizin show for a newcomer? That was very unexpected. For me, man, I personally think that Rizin 20, 2019's New Year's Eve show, for me, might be the very best MMA event of all time. And I'm not just saying that because I do have an affinity for Rizin naturally, but if you just look at that card top to bottom, it was absolute madness. Some of the best fights that year. And, in my opinion, that trilogy fight between Ham and Hamasaki is one of the best ever, especially for the women. Just so many notable moments on that event. And if I was to say a strong second, I would go with Rizin 14, which was 2018's New Year's Eve show. I mean, the New Year's Eve shows are always expected to be big and good. So I think if you were to pick any, of course, maybe go with those. But for me, I think Rizin 20 is just sensational.
Shingo, what about you? What would you recommend to the fans?
Well, I mean, Drake pretty much nailed it. And man, you've got a good memory. I don't think I can think of stuff off the top of my head like that. Rizin 20, I think it was definitely a good one. And Rizin 14, I think, was a good one too. Yeah, I mean, overall, it's like we try to put on, the fighters put on a fantastic show. They always bring it. They always fight really hard. And yeah, I think I think any fight would be recommended, any event. But especially Rizin 20, since they are available on the official YouTube channel. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great place to start.
Personally, Rizin 20, me too. Because you know why? I was there. I was there live. So, like, I was fortunate enough, lucky enough, that was my first Rizin show to cover, right? And man, it was an incredible night. It's just, like one of the best shows I've ever seen live. And just if you look at, like Drake said, top to bottom, the names that just fought that night, that competed that night,
and the Bellator crossover too.
Yeah, the Bellator crossover, and then even that whole, like, what is it, 3 days of fights,
right,
was great, man. Chandler was there. He fought. Fedor, Rampage fought. Like, I don't know, being in that arena, like, people talk about it all the time. It's like the experience of being at a Rizin show is like being at a Pride show. And I've never been to Pride, but I did watch Pride, when it was actually going on, not like I was watching it, like reruns of it. But yeah, like going to Rizin, it is another experience. Like I don't know how to explain it, man. You got to go and feel it. You got to go and feel it in the arena. It's just, how many people were in that stadium?
I think we had around 30, like 29,000 or something. Wow. But the energy that night particularly was very high. I think, as Drake mentioned, I think it had to do with the whole, cross promotion with Caldwell versus Horiguchi. Just everything leading up to that night. I think it was fantastic.
For sure. And yeah, man, it's just, I don't know, it's hard to explain. So if you're a fan of MMA, once the borders open up, get your vaccines, get your visas. And when Rizin has a show, man, you just got to go over there. It doesn't even matter if foreign fighters are fighting on the show. It's just the experience. There's going to be violence. That's why you're there. You're there for violence, right? So if you want violence and a good show, then just go there. Just go to Saitama. My next trip is, I want to be at the Tokyo Dome. That's my next trip. Like, when you guys have a show and it's open and the Tokyo Dome is open, I want to be at the Tokyo Dome. Because isn't Tokyo Dome like way bigger?
It's 55,000 total capacity.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, man. If they do a major show in that stadium, I'm figuring like there's gonna be some major names and stuff like that. So I'm anticipating that. Let's go to the next question. We'll start with let me see. Oh, same. Alex, man, he's coming with some good questions. What other relatively unknown talent in Rizin do you guys see being able to have a run like Yuri in the UFC? Shingo, what do you think?
Man, that's a very good question. I mean, I would say, let's see. I would say Tofik Musaev, the Grand Prix winner.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely got talent, I think. And I mean, the lightweight division in the UFC is they're all monsters over there. But I think he could probably hold his own over there.
And also, like, I think Kanaka, she's just starting out, right? She could possibly make a good run. Let's talk about her. You know what I mean? Like, because she is a very talented fighter out of Japan in the UFC. Not many not many Japanese fighters in the UFC, right? How many are there, Drake? Drake's the numbers guy.
Japanese fighters in the UFC right now. I mean, there's got to around 5-ish. Not that many. I mean, Kanako. Let's see. I mean, obviously, is Takashi Sato still in?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and then who's the third one you're thinking of?
Mizuki.
Right.
Mizuki Inoue.
Yeah. That could very well be it right now. Yeah.
I think so. Naoki Inoue's older sister.
Right.
That's
right.
That's right. Like a person that I thought would go into the UFC and do really well was Manel Cape, and his run so far has not. It's been disappointing to many people, you know what I mean, and it just shocks me, you know what I mean. And at the same time, there's been fighters that I thought were not going to do as well in the UFC and have gone in there and back-to-back finishes. Like it's just, I don't know. Sometimes like when a fighter jumps into the UFC and hops into that top 15 immediately, it can work against you. You know what I mean? What do you think, Drake, about the runabout of Manel Cape?
It's been very interesting. Obviously, drop to flyweight is kind of the biggest thing about it, right? Obviously, made his run at bantamweight, became the champion in Rizin, enters right in as has all these fights canceled. What was it? 3 of them. And then he gets the backup spot for the title fight, which is like, oh, that's pretty crazy. Good for him. You love to see that. Then takes on Pantoja in a fight where, I think it was a little bit closer than maybe people would have thought. I did think Pantoja won, but the main thing that came out of it was, he was kind of gun shy. Of course, and this is something also to jump ahead a little bit. When you look at going from the ring to the cage, everyone likes to talk about that. But in this case with him also going from the ring to the Apex cage, which is notoriously smaller than the other cages, 10-foot difference or whatever. And I don't know how big the Rizin ring is, Shingo, in terms of dimensions, but I imagine it's bigger than that ring because everyone says that ring's pretty small, and you can just kind of see the difference when you go from place to place. So I feel like maybe that had an effect on him, at least early on. Definitely not the whole reason, because I think if you look at his career up until that point, obviously he got better and improved a lot, but he hasn't been fighting too much differently, and it's just kind of been a matter of styles clash, I think. So that was the Pantoja fight. And then obviously the Nicolau one is one that essentially everybody believes he should have won. I thought it was incredibly close and came down to like the last minute, but even in that last minute, people think he very clearly edged it. So I don't think, I mean, he clearly hasn't met our expectations whatsoever because we had very high hopes for him. I think that's fair to say. He was a top 7 and 8-ish bantamweight, in my opinion, in the world at the very least, going into the UFC, and then dropping down to flyweight. Thought he would do very well because no reason not to. But yeah, man, it sucks that he maybe did a little bit wrong in this last fight, but I don't know. There's a lot of very unique elements about it. And I've even seen people mention the lack of wrestling shoes for him. I'm like, I don't know about that. People have been saying that, the Apex octagon again, a little bit slippery, but I don't know. That's just people kind of making too many excuses at that point, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Now, here's another question. This one for Shingo. It's how much does Shingo hate Zhang Weili for backing out of the Rizin 9 versus Kanako? This is an interesting question.
That's so funny. Well, I mean, it is what it is, right? And it sucked at the time. I mean, I went out. I went out to China on my own, and I went to the Black Tiger Academy. I couldn't speak a word of Chinese. Nobody couldn't understand a word of English or Japanese. It was quite an adventure for me. But after going through all that, getting the fight contract signed, and for it to not just happen like that, it kind of sucked. And the whole process of just going back and forth, it was all a mess. But I mean, it is what it is. So I mean, obviously, I'm sure there were many intentions from many different entities or people around her. We were. Interesting is that we were just talking about this before we went live, but maybe for Zhang Weili, it was the right call. I mean, well, obviously, it was the right call. I mean. She went to the UFC and became the champion and just made a huge change in the whole Chinese MMA scene and helped enormously for the growth of MMA in China, right? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, I think things happen for a reason. I mean, it does suck that it didn't happen in Rizin, but all we can hope is that this fight happens in the UFC at it. I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, and the crazy part is that if she did fight Murata, that could have the trajectory of her career could have been thrown off, extremely, because stylistically it's not a good matchup for Zhang Weili. You know what I mean? Like if you look at her UFC run, who has she fought with the skill set of Murata? Nobody, right? Drake, do you remember anybody that she's fought that has that wrestling credential that could pin her down and beat her up and ground and pound her?
Well, I mean, I think that when you're looking at somebody like Hyon Ko, she's that level of wrestler that stands above and beyond everybody not named Tatiana Suarez and Carla Esparza. Like, that's the elite three when it comes to wrestling. And I think people will quickly find that out as she has more and more fights. But if you're to make the very closest of comparisons, which is still a very wide gap for who Weili has fought so far in the UFC specifically, I mean, it would probably have to be Jessica Aguilar, right? Who is clearly at the tail end of her career then and still now. So that's still a very wide gap, but I think she'd probably be the closest, honestly.
All right, here's another question for Shingo. Shingo says, what does Shingo think about wrestling shoes in Rizin?
Well, it's a tradition. It's one of those traditions that have been kept since the Pride days, right? I mean, in the rules, official rules, you can wear a gi if you want to, and it's just in there. Obviously, there definitely has been some changes. There's been some debates as the sport has continued, and there's definitely been some questions where, should we still stick with these rules? I wouldn't say ancient, but these unique rules as the MMA is growing at a rapid pace, as a sport outside of Japan. So, there's been some debates, but still, I mean, I think it's part of the reason why it makes the fights more interesting, because it's totally up to the fighter, right? If you wear shoes, it can definitely work for you, but it can also work against you. So that decision is it's up to the fighter. And now Rizin has made the changes to the rules where you wear wrestling shoes, you cannot throw kicks of any kind or knees. So that's a big change. Basically, I think that rule set will eliminate many people from wearing wrestling.
Well, Minnow is the only person to do it so far, right? Since that changed.
Yeah, I think so.
It didn't work out for him to.
No,
not at all. Yeah, I love how you guys did the rules like that, because the rule change like that, because it's like, we're not gonna take it away from you, but we're kind of like telling you maybe you shouldn't wear shoes anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you can't kick. Like, kicking is like take away half of your body. You know what I mean? You might as well just go in there with just your waist up and fight somebody, right? It's just something that, but you do, what one thing that's interesting about the shoes is that it does make it different from anybody else? Because there is no other promotion in the world. I've never seen it where they allow shoes at all. You know what I mean? And I remember the first time I saw shoes was Crow Cop. That's the first time I saw, in Pride wearing shoes, and he was head kicking the hell out of people with those shoes on, right? But it wasn't like he was hitting them with the shoe. He was hitting them with the shin, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, it wasn't like an advantage for him, but I bet you he was able to plant his feet much better, right? And I think that's an advantage for somebody, right? So yeah, I think you guys made the right call on the shoes thing.
I think leaving the shoes still gives options for straight boxers to come in and challenge MMA. It just leaves another option to go after another set of combat sports. So it's just trying to leave the option there, trying to keep the doors as much as open as possible.
All right, now this is
they did have shoes in the early days of the UFC as well, John. By the way.
Oh, that's right. But that's
when Mark Coleman got kicked.
Yeah, that's like 20 years ago, right? Recently the shoes was like you saw Manel Cape wearing the shoes. Right. I think he wore them at Rizin 20, right? Did he wear them then? Yeah. Right. So, all right. Alex, he has a question. This is a good question. It's like, what's my best way as an American to watch Rizin live?
Live now. The link
live now. Okay. Okay.
Live now. The link should be up now. I think it went up last night. But you can follow our Rizin FF English account on Twitter. That should navigate you over to the Live Now link, pay-per-view link. Right now we have Rizin 28, Rizin 29, and you can also buy a package, both events for I think 50% off or something. So yeah, Live Now, and follow our Twitter English account, and you can get all the information there. All
right. Let's. I think that's a good segue into the tournament that's going on, or it's about to start at Rizin 28, right? The Bantamweight Grand Prix. Man, this is one of those Grand Prix that, man, I've talked to 15 out of the 16 fighters, and it's just like you guys did select like the best 16 that you could in the country. And most countries don't have 16 of these fighters, like these types of fighters, right? You have a good mix of guys that are vets, and then you got the young up and comers that have extreme talent. And and the matchups are good, and it's not like you guys matched them up somewhere behind closed doors. These matchups they happen live, right? And yeah, man, some of these matchups like are really, really good. The most intriguing matchup for me is Shintaro versus Naoki Inoue. That is the fight. There's so much ahead of that fight. I talked to both guys. I released the Shintaro interview. I just haven't released the Inoue interview. It will be released in a couple of days. But yeah, man, Naoki, man, the dude is on fire. Like, he is on extreme fire, and he's only 24, something like that.
Yeah, he's still very young.
Yeah, very young, man. And his personality, Shingo, like, he's a guy that's like so soft spoken, right? When you talk to him, is he that way?
Yeah, absolutely. He's always like that to anybody. Like, you can barely hear him. It's like you constantly have to ask twice. Like, what did you say? What? And yeah, he just has that like non-aggressive attitude.
Yeah, how big of an opportunity is this for him to? And he's the one who selected Shintaro, right? He's the one who said, "Hey, I want to fight him during the draw." What do you think about this matchup? Because Shintaro, he's been out for, I believe, 18 months with a serious like neck injury, and he says he's fully recovered. But I mean, you never know heading into these fights, right?
Since Rizin 20.
Yeah, since Rizin 20, that's right. So what do you think of this matchup in particular? Do you think like the guy that wins this could be a guy that's at the end of the, in the finals?
I agree. A lot of people in Japan, they say that this is like the finals, and they're both up there. I mean, let's talk about Inoue a bit. I mean, he was signed to the UFC at 19 years old. I think he was the youngest in the history of the UFC, being signed at 19 years old. And that's a bold statement right there. Being signed at 19, And you already know the UFC level when you're 19 years old. And he relocated himself over to New York with Sarah Longo over in New York. So he knows what the top level is like. He's experienced it firsthand. And he's constantly training with the guys who are in the top rankings of the UFC. So he knows what it's like. And I think that's a huge advantage for any fighter to have. And especially that he's had that in such an early stage of his career, I think he can work off of that and he can learn so much more at a higher level. But it doesn't mean that he can beat Ishiwatari easily. I mean, Ishiwatari is a long-time veteran. He's tough as nails. He's got tremendous heart. And, he's definitely one of the top guys in the Japanese bantamweight division could offer, no doubt. And when you just mentioned his 18-month layoff, the ring rust and whatnot, but I think the last Horiguchi's performance was a very good example. He's been out for over 18 months, and he fought the rematch against Sakura, but he looked on point, right? No one could tell that he had any ring rust. He didn't show any of that. That's because he was able to train healthy with a healthy body for the first time in so many years. Like, he had a good fight camp where he wasn't nursing anywhere. So that's why he was able to prepare fully for the first time in his career and didn't show any ring rust. So now let's put that into Ishiwatari. He's always been struggling with a neck injury. Like, he had this chronic pain, and it was always bothering him, so he had to nurse it during practice. But this is probably his first time in a long time where he's had a full fight camp injury-free without having to nurse anything. So the conditioning, the leading up to this fight, I don't think the 18-month layoff is going to play in a negative way. So, and 100% healthy Ishiwatari is a scary dude, and he probably can offer a lot. So overall, like, this one's really hard, and many people say that this is like the finals happening in the opening round. I mean, for the fans, they would hate to see either one of them go so early.
Yeah, for sure. And Drake, like, in a way, he picked Ishiwatari, and in a way, it's like, is he picking the low-hanging fruit with the biggest name? You know what I mean? With the long layoff, and Shingo makes a great point that there's a mystery behind him being fully healthy. But he also did mention in the interview with me that he did get up to like 80 kilograms, which is huge for a bantamweight, right? So I don't know, man. It's weird. Like, what do you think about this whole situation of him picking, Shintaro?
I mean, yeah, I guess you could kind of be right in that sense. I like all of the points that Shingo did present, though. But ultimately, for me, like, I feel like Naoki is at this stage where, like, it doesn't matter, man. This guy is kind of just blazing. He's been blazing through everybody so far, and like the momentum he has, like he could have got the title shot against Horiguchi without being in the tournament, I think, and I feel like a lot of people feel that way as well. But that's kind of what makes this so much more exciting, and watching him, in this matchup in particular against somebody like Ishiwatari, who, when he wasn't 100% and, taking on Hiro Masa in that last fight, which was that late fight of the year contender on Rizin 20, like, he still did very, very good, so him feeling much better than normal, that's definitely kind of a sleeper against the guy who should maybe be favored to win it all. But again, Naoki's just absolutely killing it right now, looking amazing, especially for his age. Like, it's definitely a very, very compelling matchup for the opening round of all of them. And I think it might be that thought process for Naoki, like, maybe understanding that, all right, I am expecting the best Ishiwatari. Let's get him out of the way now if I can. Don't want him to really build up his own momentum like he's got going. So there's a lot that goes into it, I think.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Shingo.
Let me add to that. I think this may not be the main reason, but I think you have to consider the fact that Ishiwatari's beat Oka Sasaki, who is like, his teammate,
right,
time friend. So I think maybe that might have to do something with, with picking Ishiwatari.
redemption.
All right, before we move along, Rain has this question about the Bellator rankings, so I'm gonna get into this right now. And I am part of the Bellator rankings panel, and he's asking me, why is Valor Laredo ranked above Porto? I don't know. Why? I just turn in my rankings. That's it. Like, I don't control the rankings. Any question you ask me about the rankings, I don't know, because all I do is go into the website, turn in my rankings after each Bellator event, and then they put up the rankings. You know what I mean? Like, you need to go ask Bellator. Like, I have no idea. And Bellator doesn't even control the rankings. They have like a third party doing it. So if you have a gripe, go at them. For me, I turn in my rankings. And did I rank her above Porto? You will never find out, because I'm not going to tell you. You know what I mean? You'll never know. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. Like, the rankings come out. There's always going to be gripes about the rankings. Rizin can do a rankings. People are going to be mad about those rankings. They're going to be like, who's ranking these fighters? The UFC rankings, they've been criticized since day one. You know what I mean? Like, it will never stop happening. So there is some confusing aspects of rankings and why there's movement this way or that way. But I'm personally, me being involved in the panel, I just turn in my rankings, man, and then they do it. So there's nothing I can really tell you. There's other shows that criticize the rankings. I say go talk to those people, because they're the ones who will probably dig into all the panelists. Like, the panelists should show their rankings, and the panelists don't know what the fuck they're talking about. The panelists are idiots, and I'll be like, hey, you're up to, you could have your opinion, man. Like, I don't care if you call me an idiot. It doesn't matter to me. I just turn in my rankings. So Rain, I hope that answers your question. Now let's move on to the Grand Prix again. The main event for Rizin 28, Kaya Sakura versus Suto Watanabe, right? During my interview with Suto, he's wearing a hoodie, and the hoodie is a guy calf kicking another guy.
Really?
Yeah. So you remember when I asked him, like, are you going to use the calf kicks? And his hoodie was a guy calf, and he's like, oh, it's not part of my arsenal. But I don't believe him. Do you believe him, Shingo?
I have no idea. But I think in that interview, he did make a point that, after, Kaya Sakura losing directly by calf kicks, I don't think he's going to be that easy to hit. Mm-hmm. So I think he has a point there. And I also do think that Suto Watanabe can throw devastating calf kicks. I'm sure he can, but just the way how he fights, it's not like, I don't think it's meant for him too much. But I'm gonna have to go back and look at that interview, because I did not even look at his design.
I want to get that hoodie. Like, I'm gonna have to ask him, like, where he got that, because I would like to wear that calf kick hoodie. That's a good one, man. The calf kick, right? Has that altered the game, Shingo? Like, completely, right? There's people breaking their legs nowadays because of the calf kick.
Yeah, well, I mean, the calf kick's been around for quite some time. It just hasn't been, utilized in a way where in a highlight fight. For me, I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but for me, my first time I've seen a calf kick that was like so devastating, it showed immediately. Because up until a calf kicks, leg kicks take time, right? It builds up the damage. It'll start making effect later in the fight, after the third round, maybe in the championship round. But the calf kicks are like immediate damage. And I think for me, the first person I saw use it was Diogo Takahashi. He's a ONE FC fighter now. But Diogo Takahashi, he had like one of the nastiest leg kicks. And when you think about it, he was definitely using the calf kicks. So that was back in Valley Theater Japan, VTJ, when he fought Takaya. So I can't remember. I'm so bad with years. I think 2013, 2014-ish. Yeah. But that's what I first saw it happen in front of me. Like, wow, those must be very painful kicks. But yeah, right now everyone's using them. Everyone's practicing them. And obviously there are defenses for it. And if you can defend properly, you won't take as much damage. So I think for any offense, there's definitely going to be a defense. So I think there's going to be a time where people are going to stop using calf kicks because the defense level is going to be so high. I think right now is at that stage right now.
Now with this matchup, Drake, Sakura goes in there. He's one of the biggest stars for the promotion, probably one of the biggest athlete stars. I don't know about the sports arena in Japan, but I would figure, that he's with his YouTube and everything that's going on with him, he's a star, right? And that could work against you. We've seen it happen to a lot of fighters. We're seeing it happen to Conor McGregor right now, right? Where you start drinking your Kool-Aid a little too much, and when you're fighting the best dudes in the promotion or around the world, it just doesn't work out too well for you. That's a question too. And also another question is, can he come back from that devastating loss to Horiguchi? Because I thought that was a really devastating loss, man. I feel like he got exposed extremely by Horiguchi. Horiguchi pretty much went in there and took him out pretty easily. But in the same way as kind of like how Kai Sakura took out Horiguchi in the first fight, right? So, Shuto Watanabe, does he have anything to lose, Drake, like heading into this? It's like you could take out one of the big snakeheads in this tournament in the first round.
Yeah, well, I kind of what you're saying about drinking his own Kool-Aid and everything. I think maybe that could have been the case with the Horiguchi fight, the Horiguchi rematch, and maybe that relieved some pressure by having things having it go the way that it did, and now going into this and having to work his way through a tournament to get back to this potential trilogy. Maybe something he needed, right? You never know how people can come back from losses, and generally it's a better learning experience than when they win. So as for Shuto, though, yeah, I don't think he really has anything to lose. And this for me might be, I don't want to say the most interesting matchup because there's a lot of very interesting ones in the opening round. But I mean, when you look at it, like, Kai absolutely, should be one of the top three guys favored alongside, Naoki, and take your pick for the third guy, I suppose. And obviously the biggest superstar. I think that's pretty easy to say. For Shuto, yeah, man, like he's got to be feeling great, loving this opportunity, because if he can take out Kai in the first round, I mean, what that does for your confidence, geez, and he's got a possibility too. Like when you look at the stylistic matchup, if he can get Kai down, things get very interesting, on the feet. I don't know if he'll have that much success, but that's what makes it fun, is that it's kind of a more traditional kind of styles clash, in my opinion. But yeah, when you look at kind of the outside elements of it for the guys, I think that's also a very big point of intrigue, like you mentioned, John. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And, it can go really either way, maybe a lot more than people will give it credit for.
Yeah, and also Kai doesn't get enough credit for his defensive wrestling. I think his defensive wrestling is pretty decent, right? He's been able to keep it on the feet for most of his fights. So, and he's actually taken other guys down in his fights, right? His takedowns are decent, compared to his opponents, his opposition. Shingo, before we move on to the next thing, is Shuto Watanabe, is that his real name?
Yeah, that's his real name. His dad was the first Shuto welterweight world champion.
Wow, that's some interesting facts right there. I didn't even have no idea. He named his son after the promotion he became a champion in. That's wild.
Yeah, when you go back and look at the latest Rizin Confessions episode, it's the story's all there. The parents didn't name Shuto because of the sport or the organization. It's the word that means to battle and to fight. And the meaning that they interpreted was like, people fight on a daily basis. They fight against themselves. They fight against society. They fight against, life is a constant repeat of fights. You fight every day. So, not only just in the ring or on the mat, he wanted his son to be a guy who's a fighter. So
yeah,
they
for sure.
They had no intent of his son wanting to be a professional fighter.
Yeah, that's that worked out well. The name fits. With the Confession series, I recommend everybody go watch that. The English subtitles are in there, so there's no confusion. It's not like you're gonna be just watching people talk and you don't know what they're talking about. You just go there and watch it. It shows you the backstory of all the fights, all the fighters, and recommend it. It'll be a great prep prep, you know what I mean, before the events, you know, coming up. So go watch those.
Always.
Before we move on to some of the other matchups, you know what I mean, like Drake, what do you think? Who's your favorite? Is Naoki your favorite in this tournament?
Oh boy, I thought you were going to go with dark horse there, which I'm sure we can answer that as well. But favorite to win it, I mean, I feel like it kind of it is between the obvious choices for me and Kai and Naoki. Yeah, I just really like how Naoki's been looking lately. He's been looking awesome. Like I said, that momentum he's got carried over, and then with Kai, it's how he'll rebound and should be motivated. You would expect to have a fire kind of lit under him to rebound and go through this tournament and show that he's still, you know, he shouldn't even have to be in the tournament, right? Like that's kind of the thought process that he might have. So I think for me, it's one of them. I do lean towards Naoki a bit though, but in terms of dark horse, I love Imanari being in it, but I think that the guy who we got asked earlier about what the more unknown talent that could potentially go on to the UFC or something like that. And you mentioned Kanako and some other Tofik, who I think a little bit more well known at this stage, but this guy who's in the tournament, I think is the dark horse, is Kazuma Kuramoto. I think that he has a serious potential, not just to win the tournament, but to do very big things in the sport overall. Just 8-1 right now, but that for me, he's the dark horse, and I like him outside of the tournament and beyond.
Yeah, that's a good choice, man. Yeah, but I don't know if he does move on to something else. I don't see him fighting at bantamweight. I think he's is he a little small? Shingo, do you think like size wise, who's the smallest? You've been with all the fighters, so you should know.
You know what? I think Kuramoto may be like smallest, like height wise. I think he may be the shortest. Yamaniha was pretty short too, but I don't know. It may be Kuramoto.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a stock. He's built like a pit bull. Like he is stocky. Like he barely has a chin because his neck is so thick. He's an elite wrestler, right? Like an elite wrestler built body. So, I mean,
who's just extremely big? Like you're like, this guy's a bantamweight. Like this is impossible.
Ulka Sasaki.
Yeah, that's for me.
Super tall. I cannot believe he used to make flyweight.
Insane.
Crazy. But in terms of this tournament, like Kaya Sakura is pretty tall too.
Mm-hmm.
He's tall. Who is tall. Yeah, those two are probably the ones who stand out in terms of like height wise.
Mm-hmm. Now with the other, there's two more fights at 28. There's the Yuki Botoya and Ryo Okada, right? Okada, I feel like he's one of the dark horses in this tournament too, man. Like not much is known about him, but he has a lot of experience, and this is a good matchup for him to kind of, elevate his name as well as win, and move on in the tournament. Shingo Okada, there's a story about him. He almost got matched up with his teammate, right? That's kind of a crazy little thing.
Yeah. So Okada and Ogi Kubo are from the same gym. They've been training for a long time. Obviously, they both entered this tournament, so if it happens, they're gonna fight. But I mean, not at the opening round, right? When there's 50 others to choose from, you're not gonna fight your teammate from the beginning. But the drawing for the tournament was a complete random drawing, and Okada picked 15th. So the way the system goes, like they all draw numbers, and the first person, obviously, I think it was Suto Watanabe, you get to pick out of 16 positions in the bracket. So Takeshi Kasugai, he was number 16. So obviously number 16 doesn't have a pick. You have to go to the only spot that's left. Well, Okada picked 15. He was second to last. And Ogi Kubo still didn't have an opponent. His teammate didn't have an opponent. So you can just see, like, for those who knew it, you can just look at Hiromasa Ogi Kubo's facial expressions and then Okada's facial expressions. They're like, oh, shit. Like, worst case, it might come down to me sitting next to my teammate. But luckily, it didn't happen. So, yeah, that was just some backstory there.
Yeah, in this fight too, Montoya, he hasn't had much Montoya. He hasn't had much success in Ryzen if you look at his record so far, but he's a dangerous fighter no matter what, man. His skill set and his experience is something that you should not laugh at. But Okada is I believe Okada's making his Ryzen debut for this tournament, right? Drake, what do you think, man, of this matchup and kind of like it's like kind of like the young guy facing the more older. He has more championships. You know, Okada's been through some stuff, but still, he hasn't been at this stage, right, with Ryzen.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing about Yuki when you do look at his career in particular, you know, these last so many years, and I mean just most of it really. This is a fight that he's supposed to win. I think that's fair to say. When you look at the guys he's lost to, like last loss was Naoki, Apache Mix before that, Hiro Masa, Victor Henry, Kyoji. Like these are all guys who, all right, he's going to lose to them. Not too terrible, but then he beats pretty much everybody else. And he's got a boatload of experience in his own right. And, you know, just rebounded off of that kind of rough Naoki loss against Shoji Maruyama at Deep 100 Impact. Looked great in that one. So I feel like for him, this is a matchup that is, you know, good for him. But like you said, another sleeper in Okada who could come in there, and Yuki has been susceptible to getting caught in things against these higher level guys, though. So that's the thing is we'll see if he's kind of hitting that point now where maybe he can't, you know, keep getting over these guys who are on the come up a little bit more. But when you look at him, his career, that's just kind of been the story of it, I think.
Speaking of Victor Henry, man, I'm pretty sure he's sitting at home in California like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, he would be one of the guys, right, Shingo, that if the borders were open, he would be in this tournament. Am I lying?
Absolutely, no doubt. If the borders were to open, he would have been there, no doubt.
Man, it's just yeah, it sucks for Victor Henry, but we'll see him back there. We'll see him. Now moving on, Okada's teammate Hiromasa is facing Kasugai. Kasugai is another guy, right? Kasugai is another guy. He's an interesting character, man. Talk about him. We know Hiromasa, what he brings, but Kasugai a little bit more unknown, right?
Yeah, I mean he's been active in the local circuit for quite some time. You know, obviously they fought before 7 years ago. And I think Hiromasa's fought 13 times in the past 7 years. Kasugai's fought 14 times in the past 7 years. So they've kind of had the same amount of fights since they last fought. But, you know, Hiromasa's fought in The Ultimate Fighter. He's fought for Rizin, Suto World Titles. Kasugai's been doing more local circuits and Pancrase recently. But yeah, he's a stud. His cardio is off the charts. So he can go on and on and on at a very high pace and continue to scramble, and still be moving the same way he was. So he's, you know, I mean, cardio is definitely a factor in these fights. So you can't sleep on him at all. He's got a solid ground game, and he's very good with his defense. Yeah, I think this is good. This has potential in being a really good fight.
Random question. Was Andy Hug a big star in Asia, Shingo? Do you remember him being a big star?
Absolutely. Humongous. How K1 back at, you know, the old K1, how they marketed Andy Hug was perfect. They marketed him as the blue-eyed samurai. And, you know, he had like a key staple move, which was the axe kick. You know, and it's kind of like Mirko's left high, right? So whenever Andy Hug would show his axe kick, the crowd would love him because of his pro-Japan, you know, approach. His nickname, Blue-Eyed Samurai. I think he was married to a Japanese woman. I think so. But yeah, he was a huge star. He was absolutely loved by all Japanese fans. I don't think many people disliked him at all. I think his grave is over here in Japan too. I think he's buried, or not buried, but like his grave is over here.
You know how big Andy Hug of a star he was in Asia? In Korea, the biggest MMA community blog in Korea, it's called Andy Hug.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think many people know that, but that is like for MMA combat sports, it's not a website, it's a blog, Andy Hug. is the one. Like everything goes up there. People are discussing everything to do with mixed martial arts on that forum. So yeah, it's kind of like the underground for Korea, but it's called Andy Hug. So shows you like how big of a star he was, right? Yeah. Now moving back to the tournament, those are the 4 fights for 28. Now we got the other 4 fights at 29. Let's start with Shintaro. Is it Shintaro versus Kuya Ito, right? This fight. We'll start with is this Shintaro? Am I wrong with his name?
It's Kintaro.
Kintaro.
Oh, Kintaro. My bad. Kintaro. Okay, Kintaro. Like this dude is he has a little following, right? Andy, not Andy? Drake. I call you Andy. Drake. What do you think this matchup? I mean, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, they're all interesting, John. But Kintaro getting to be in the tournament here and taking on Ito, welcoming him to the Rizin ring. As you said, a little bit of a good following there from Kintaro, and we've seen him against the likes of Kato and Kenta Takizawa, who's also in the tournament, and that was his last fight at Rizin 24. Pretty close one, split decision. I think people remember Kintaro a lot for the tattoos he has, right? He's got some cool ink on him, which stands out to a lot of fans in Japan. I don't know. This one's kind of hard for me to assess. I honestly don't know too much about Ito. Been fighting on a more local circuit, I believe. But Kintaro, definitely a fan favorite, a guy that people can get behind. Always fun to watch for the most part. Has some nasty ground and pound, can knock you out on the feet. He's pretty well rounded, and obviously doesn't have the best record or anything, but his fights are always fun to watch. So him getting to be a part of the tournament is just fun in general. So I look forward to it for him, definitely.
Yeah, Shingo, what do you think? What do you think of this? Did Kintaro choose Ito, or did Ito choose Kintaro?
Yeah, Kintaro chose Ito.
And do you think that was something that was strategic, or was it just something that just happened?
Well, I'm sure it was strategic. Kintaro says that. Well, I didn't really care. I just went for the guy with the shiny belt. So that was his statement. Like I just want to fight a guy with a shiny belt. So that was his statement. But I'm sure it was a strategic move to pick Kuya. So Ito's the current Grachan Bantamweight champion. He doesn't have the best record. I think he has a few losses, but those are all back when he made his debut. Like I think he's got a really good record in his past 5 or 6 fights, which is after he made the transition to Brave Gym, which is run by Kazuyuki Mieta, former Olympian wrestler. He's best known for the 4-second knockout by Kid Yamamoto. He was on the receiving end of that 4-second jumping knee knockout. But he's a former wrestling medalist, I think, former Olympic wrestler, and he knows how to teach kids. He knows how to teach. He's a great coach. So after making the transition, obviously his record has been, he turned it around. He has that cardio, and he mixes. He's a former karate guy, and now with his wrestling MMA training, he can mix things up at a very high pace. So it's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a good fight. That one. When we spoke to Kintaro, he, I think I asked him, like, are you just going to go straight up for the knockout? And he said, no, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, we could go to the ground. He's ready for everything. But I don't believe him. I think he's going to go out there and bang. I think that's what he's going to do. Because he's going to be I believe he's going to be in Osaka's his hometown, man. Like, there's going to be people there for him. And it's going to be, like the feeling, the emotions of that. I feel like it's going to run through him really hard. And he's going to go out there and try to put a big stamp on Ito's face, with his fist. So we'll see what happens. Now, the next matchup is Osuka versus Hyon. Man, when I spoke to Hyon, man, I just like that guy, man. He has a very good attitude. I don't know, like I've never spoken to him before. I saw his fight. He had Rizin 27. He won in 27 seconds. Was that
fantastic?
Yeah, fantastic, right? It was a fantastic debut. Drake Osuka is he's an old dog, right? He's had over 50 fights, and he's facing Hyon, a guy that it seems like his record doesn't really show it, but I feel like he's coming into his own now at the right time.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, and he's coming in off of that knockout that was just sensational, quick 30 seconds to less than that. But yeah, Atsuka, it's funny, that's a lot of experience for a guy who, still 30, 34, you would feel like when he's got that many fights, might be a little bit older than that. And, has a decent amount of losses to his record, a lot of wins as well. But, when you're taking on a guy who's, again, momentum is something I look at a lot, especially when we're going into tournaments like this. And, even though it was just one win that, Yamashita has going in, a very, very good one and didn't take any damage. So kind of nice and fresh, has that feel for what the Rizin stage is like. I think he could do big things. And if he's able to hit that hard and land a good one on Atsuka, who's obviously been hit many times in his career just by default by having that many fights, could be another guy who's a little bit of a sleeper just for the abilities that he's showing right now at this stage. But yeah, man, there's so many good picks for that dark horse in this tournament. So yeah,
Hyon seems like it. And Osuka, when we spoke with him, he was focusing on finishing fights more, coming into this tournament. So that could change a lot for him, right? Maybe he's seen, and like he's had over 50 fights. If you look at his face, he looks like he's had a lot of fights, right? Like he's not the youngest looking guy in the tournament, but I don't know, man. Hyon has a huge opportunity to knock off a good name in Osuka. So we'll see what happens. But with you, Shingo, like Osuka, do you think that this could be the last run for him, to kind of get to that, like that next level of status in Japanese MMA?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he did enter the Dream Bantamweight tournament. He was part of that. Didn't do so well. He already did one Rizin Grand Prix, Bantamweight Grand Prix. I'm sure he's thinking that this is his last run, and it's a big opportunity for him to make a statement. He's been in this game for a long time, and I think he's going to put everything into this tournament to prove what he's been doing. Just random fact. I just did a bunch of numbers for the Rizin Grand Prix, and it came out that Otsuka has, throughout his whole career, Otsuka has a total of over 9 hours in the ring as a fighter.
A lot of time.
Over 9 hours. His average fight time is about 11 minutes and 50 seconds or something like that. But damn, being in the ring, competing in the ring for over 9 hours of your life, that's a long. And I think Horiguchi was at like 4 hours and something.
Wow.
So he's got like twice as much time, which means that he goes to distance a lot, but he also has that cardio to do so. So yeah, Otsuka, it's going to be very interesting on how he approaches the fight. Overall, he's a much well-rounded fighter than Hyon. On paper, Otsuka should have it, but again, you never know what happens in MMA. Like Hyon has proven himself that he can finish fights whenever. He has shown that he has absolute bombs in his hands, and never say never in MMA.
Osuka, I remember he was talking about that he brought in what's his name? He's won championship. He's like a contender in the lightweight division. Man, it's slipping my mind. I hate it when that happens. But yeah, he did have a new training partner, like somebody that he brought in that is high level to help him prepare for this tournament. And the dude is a lightweight, basically a welterweight, right? So we'll see how this matchup plays out. The next one is, speaking of guys with a lot of experience and and in a pretty decent name worldwide, right? Is Imanari, man, the guy that is, there's something, when something is named after you, you'll live on in the history of this sport. And the Imanari role still being used to this day. Everybody knows who he is. When I put up the interview, people that I didn't even know that probably that thought of Imanari anymore, they were like, oh, Imanari, because how many times has Imanari done interviews? I don't really remember him doing many like interviews, especially translated, right? So and it seemed like he understands English, because when I was asking questions, when you look at their face, they, when they know something that you're saying, they kind of give that like little expression, like, "Oh yeah, I understand," right? So, but with this, it's like you got one of the young bucks coming up versus Imanari, one of the old dogs, right? And one thing that was good about Kenta, he said that I'm gonna get the knockout or Imanari's gonna rip my leg off. Like that's basically what he said about the fight. And I love that attitude, man. He's a straight assassin, Kenta, man. He's going in there to kill. And with Imanari, man, he's just a cool, calm, collected. So it's just so funny, like the differences in personality and everything. What do you think about Imanari right now? In his career, Drake. What do you see in him?
It's very, very interesting with Imanari because I spoke to him also for Broaden Horizon episode 8 out now, everybody. And he I asked him, like, do you still get nervous at this point? Having had all these fights and being 45 years old, and you wouldn't really know it considering how he's still able to compete and look pretty great out there. And he said, yeah, still get the nerves every single time, just kind of how it is. And like, that's interesting, man. You wouldn't know it. He's so like stone cold, like that vibe that he gives off. And I think that just must be from living that grappling lifestyle for so long now, competing in MMA for 20 years. So in terms of experience, he's got everybody pretty much beat pretty easily. And then taking on a guy like Kenta, who I love the awareness. He understands that if I go to the ground, I'm in serious trouble here. And then Imanari, I think, kind of feels the same way, where, all right, I always want to get to the ground. Like, what to expect from Imanari. It's just a matter of whether or not you can stop it, which is a lot easier said than done. And Kenta, in these past 2 or so fights, the Sasaki one he just recently had, he's been out grappled a bit, which has kind of led to his demise. And he's been able to do very well on the feet because that's where he excels against these fighters. But yeah, this is the most cut and dry matchup, I think, of the first round. Striker versus grappler, and I guess any, for the most part, is going to be that way with Imanari when he's that guy and that good at it. But I'm very excited to see it, man. It's so cool, I think, to have him even a part of this and be in Rizin come in full circle a little bit, having fought in Pride back in the day. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. Kenta could definitely get the win, as if it stays on the feet, as we know. That's just kind of how it is, right?
When you guys were putting this tournament together, Shingo, did you immediately think of Imanari as one of the 16?
Actually, no. He was definitely one of the last ones, because obviously you want to pick. We want to make the best. We want to gather the best available talent at the time. So, but we also get a lot of voices saying that, dude, 16 is way too much. Why didn't you just do an 8?
Mm-hmm.
But I think 8 would be. There's so much more talent that we could introduce. If we did 8, there would be so many. The picking process would be so tough. At 16, we had about. We tried to negotiate with other fighters, but some were just they just couldn't enter for for various reasons. But we had like 2 or 3 where we're like, okay, so what should we do? And so I mean, we definitely thought about like bringing in Tamaru, who lost to Shuto Watanabe. But he is, he's still a heavily touted prospect, and he was winning the fight until he lost.
Yeah.
So there were voices about that. So that's when I was going through my list. I was like, hey, maybe Imanari would be because of that fact where he has potential of beating everybody. It's not like where he's an average fighter that can maybe put on a good fight with anybody. No, he has that fact. His arsenal is so strong that he has potential of beating anybody we put in front of him. He's not, the top ranked guy, but he still has a potential of beating all 15 guys. So, that's when we were like, oh yeah, that would be great. Like he could be like the Joker, where he has potential of beating anybody. I mean, come on, like Kai Asakura is like the big prospect. Everybody thinks he's gonna win. The pure striker, young, full momentum. Hey, I would love to see Asakura and Imanari.
Yeah.
Because Imanari still has that potential of beating Asakura, right? So with just that anticipation that he can bring by him entering the Grand Prix, it just made perfect sense. So everybody agreed on spot.
Yeah, the people who have the questions, we're gonna get to those, in a few. Yeah, Imanari. In a fantasy world, Imanari goes in there and leg locks everybody and wins this tournament and wins and faces Horiguchi and leg locks him and then retires. That's a fantasy, right? For him. That's what I think. That's what he wants.
Story of the century.
Yeah, it would be. It would be the story of the century. A guy that is at the tail end of his career, but in his mind, when talking to him, he's not quitting. He's not quitting. He's not retiring anytime soon, I don't think.
He said he'll go 20 more years.
Yeah, he'll go 20 more years. And I just hope that Imanari, when he walks out, he's carrying a mannequin's leg. Like a leg of a mannequin and just walking out over his shoulder, just like, I'm ready to take people's legs home, right? And every time he does, he wins, he takes another leg and adds another leg and comes out the next event. Like, Imanari, I hope you're listening or watching this, or somebody gets that information to him. That would be a great way to enter every fight. But anyways, the last one on the docket is we talked about him earlier. Drake said he's one of the dark horses is Kuramoto, and he has incredible wrestling pedigree versus Yamaniha, right? A Brazilian. Is he Brazilian Japanese or just Brzilian?
He's Brazilian Japanese.
Okay, so he's Brazilian Japanese, comes from a great camp. You know what I mean? Some of the newest killers that have been added to the Rizin roster, and he's just another one of them. A lot of experience in Pancrase. I remember watching him for years over at Pancrase, thinking like he's just at the border or the edge of becoming like one of the top fighters in that division, but he just kept on climbing up and losing, right? Like that's kind of like the story of him. But I think he's focused more, interviewing him, last week. He focused more on just, training with his guys. What was the gym, Shingo, his gym?
Bonsai.
Yeah, gym. Bonsai. Yeah, that's right. With Kleber and the
Roberto.
Roberto, and they got a great team over there. And Shrek's over there too, right? Shrek, the superweight guy. But yeah, this matchup, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna give you my pick. I think Kuramoto goes in there and suplexes him really bad. Just like Kuramoto, man, he's a killer. Like I believe he is also one of the dark horses here. He's kind of up there in age, so he has kind of a sense of urgency. I interviewed him. The interview hasn't come out yet, but he has a sense of urgency because he knows he's not that young, but he has a lot of fight in him. And this is a huge opportunity to just rise up and just take over the MMA scene in Japan and, maybe worldwide. Who knows, man, beyond that. But yeah, Shingo, backstory of this, of Yamaniha, picking him for this tournament.
Yeah, well, Yamaniha, I mean, so you know how Kleber was recommended by Roberto?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So yes, in Rizin, if you win in an impressive way, you have the opportunity to say something you want in on the microphone post-fight interview. So when Roberto fought, he brought in Kleber and was like, "Hey, Rizin, you got to check this guy out. He's my boy, and you will not be disappointed. We bring in Kleber, right? Kleber fights, he wins. He takes a mic, and goes, "Hey, Rizin, you guys got to get this guy in. My boy Yamaniha, Alan Yamaniha. So, dude, if Yamaniha wins, who is he gonna bring in next? We gotta stop this chain of reaction." But it's just one of those things where a strong camp is identified, and they just keep on bringing in new talent, and they just keep on performing well. So obviously Kleber is he's gonna get his fight against Sakura Mikuru. But yeah, it was definitely his recommendation, and say, hey, you got to check this guy out. You got to at least give him a chance. And Yamaniha is a current Pancrase #1 ranked fighter, so it makes sense. He's not a low level guy. He's definitely a high level guy within the Japanese MMA circuit. So I think that one was kind of a no brainer. But yeah, the bonsai recommendation should stop soon.
The domino effect of the bonsai team, you know what I mean? But what is this question? Breakout score looking. What do you think about this, Drake? Can Alan Yamaniha be the breakout star Rizin is looking for?
I mean, I think there are some other people who've kind of fitting that bill in the progress of fitting that bill. And Yamani has training partner in particular, Roberto Satoshi de Souza, even Clever himself. Like, I think that breakout star role is kind of being taken, and Naoki's becoming one. Like a lot of these guys we've kind of talked about already. And not to say that Yamaniha can't join them, of course, but we'll have to see how he does here in a pretty tough matchup. And for being a bonsai guy, it's interesting to see that he actually, not too many submissions on his record yet, and taking on Kuramoto, who, like you said, John, I already said that I'm high on him, and I think that he's going to go out there and win this one. And it's crazy about him is, like, you look at his last fight, his Rizin debut, right? Guy didn't even need his wrestling. He didn't even need his wrestling to win that fight. Went out there and got a soccer kick knockout. Like, I think that's just showing you how much potential he has as an overall fighter, where we came into that one expected some sweet suplexes because that's what he does. Oh, well, I guess not this time around. So it's a scary guy. But yeah, I mean, Yamaniha can definitely go out there and prove us all wrong. But as of right now, Kuramoto, I just like him too much.
All right. Now, before we get into some of the other questions for Shingo about Rizin, I wanted to talk about Jon Jones a little bit, you know what I mean? And pick Shingo's brain about that situation. Jon Jones, he's been public with like his situation with the UFC, trying to get more money. He actually separated from his management that was with him for over 10 years. And recently he just hired Richard Schaefer. He was the former CEO of Golden Boy, and he's done major fights. What do you think the impact of this is? Because I know you've been around all these people, right? You've been around Dana White. You work for one of the bigger names, bigger promoters in the world. Do you think they're going to get a deal done, Shingo, with Jon Jones?
I think it all comes to it's a business move, right? Everything is, as much as it's a sport, it's entertainment, it's a business, and I'm sure the UFC wants to make the fight happen. They want to make the fight happen. The fighters want to get paid more money. So how can we compromise? It just all comes down to that, and I'm sure they're gonna find a way because they all want to do it. They all want to benefit from it. And as long as everything makes sense and all parties are happy, I'm sure they're going to find a way to do it. So I think just that would be my honest assessment on this. The amount, I don't know. Somebody is going to have to compromise. Will it be the UFC, or will it be Jon Jones, or will they happily meet and agree in the middle? We don't know. But if it makes money for everybody, and if the fans want to really see it, I think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, fans want to really see it, and you deal with fighters and managers, management teams, man. Is there a lot of incompetence, do you think, on that side of it? Because I'm pretty sure there's, does delusional come in sometimes? You know what I mean, with like the figures that these fighters and these managers are tossing to you.
I'm gonna pass on that.
All right.
I mean, yes, I've met many people throughout my journey, and I've talked, negotiated with many types of people. And yeah, there are guys who are like totally out of their mind, out of their league. But yeah, I'm not gonna get into detail.
Yeah. Oh, I don't want you to get into detail. I'm just saying, like, there's got to be people out there, right? Because there's a lot of, back and forth with management and promotion.
Yeah, definitely. There are guys like that. But I mean, yeah, there are people like that.
Drake, do you think Jon Jones is ever going to fight again? This is a good move for him, right? But Dana White, he's Dana White. Dana White has a lot of power. Dana White, once he doesn't like you, he doesn't like you. It doesn't matter if it makes money sometimes, right? And I don't know.
Yeah, man. I think that obviously this is a pretty decent step in the right direction, at least going to a guy who, like you said, has dealt with some big fights and from the boxing scene, hasn't really, hasn't done MMA stuff, but has a good relationship with Dana, which is always helpful. But I don't know. I just can't see either of them really budging to something. As of right now, maybe that will change. Jon Jones fighting ever again, though, I'm sure that, maybe, probably. It doesn't mean it'll be an MMA, but, we're in that stage where a lot of crazy nonsense is happening. So who knows if he can get into that, especially with this kind of support now. But I don't know. I'm definitely not getting excited for anything. And I, wasn't going to be excited for heavyweight Jon Jones until the fight was officially booked, because he's been talking about this since like 2013, like, oh, I'll go up and fight Cain Velasquez. Remember when everybody wanted that? I wasn't buying it until we were actually getting some announcements. So I'm still going to wait on that one, but we'll see, man. I don't know.
Well, this could be a move by Jon Jones to get out of his contract too. You never know,
Yeah.
maybe he's trying to get out of his contract, and this is a guy that's why he brought him in, because one thing about Richard Schaefer, he knows about the pay-per-view model. He understands all the numbers. He knows everything about it, right? Probably more than anybody, because Richard Schaefer was a promoter, right? So this is a good move for Jon Jones, right? Because he doesn't have to come back and fight. He's rich, he's rich enough to where if he retires right now, he doesn't need to worry about money anymore. He's made good investments, it seems like, and he's living a great life, outside of fighting. So long as he doesn't get arrested, he's good. He's good to go, right? Mary Chang, no, Brian Butler is not Jon Jones's manager. It's Richard Schaefer. So if you go to like any website now on MMA, they have some type of story on Richard Schaefer.
She says if he had Ollie or Butler, things might be different.
No, I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I believe that he's bringing in the right guy. A guy that his viewpoint is outside of MMA. You know what I mean? Like he's looking at it from, outside looking in. I think that's the great point. Now let's go back to Rizin and get to some of these questions. Shingo, of course, they're gonna be all directed towards you, right? So the first one is, what's next for Ayaka Hamasaki?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, she's definitely gonna defend her title, but I guess the question would be against who, right? Mm-hmm. Especially with Japan being very hard to bring in international talent. So who do we have at our weight class? Is it Miyu Yamamoto? It's not going to be anybody that she already hasn't faced yet, right? Mm. The Japanese women's MMA level of competition, there's definitely the new generation is growing, but it won't be for another few years until they kind of make it to where Ayaka is at, Kana Sakura is at, Miyu Yamamoto is at. So, we're not sure. I mean, maybe she can go for 2 belts. I don't know, but yeah, we'll figure it out. It's a tough situation, especially with the borders closed. But yeah, we're gonna figure something out.
Yeah, now the reason why I have Drake here is because Drake will be able to give the outside, point of view and throw some fantasy into it. So Drake, what do you want next for Hamasaki? What do you think should happen?
Obviously I'm all for the Hamasaki love, and I'll take any fight that she can get. But Shingo is totally right, where she's at a point where she's beaten and fought every realistic option that wouldn't be fresh kind of at this exact moment. In a fantasy world, we would have got that 4th fight between So-Hyun. That's out of the works right now. In fantasy land, that would be the one I'd go with. But that's out of there. Obviously, Alicia Zappitella retained her title recently, controversially, albeit. What was that, last week or whatever? Kind of out of the books right now at the moment as well, at least in Japan. Maybe Ayaka could go over and they do that, but I think that's still too soon for Zappitella as well. So that leaves one option that I think we would be the best right now in terms of freshness, actually possible, at least on paper, would be Reina versus Ayaka. And yes, they have the relationship, the friendship there. Who knows if Reina's in on that. Ayaka, as she told me last time I caught up with her, she doesn't care. She'll take on anybody. She doesn't really like when people think they're all buddy all the time. Not Reina specifically, but just people, all the fighters in general. But that's the only one they haven't done, right? And for obvious reason. But hey, there it is.
Let me throw something in there too. Is maybe the winner of the Deep Jewel atomweight? tournament?
That'd be too soon, I think.
That's too soon. You think so?
Yeah.
All right. I'm just throwing
eventually that could be good, but I like what you're thinking, John. But
I'm just throwing fantasies out there. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what's going on. Like I'm
there you go.
yeah.
Siwoo Park, man.
Shingo, the next one is Kana Sakura. What's gonna happen with her? What's going on with her? Like she's on TV doing commercials. I saw, right? She's like pretty famous.
He's got short hair and doing commercials for shampoos. Is that normal? I thought like all shampoo commercial girls
generally
like long hair. But yeah, it's good. It's good that she's getting that exposure, that national exposure with a big famous corporation. So that's fantastic. So what's next for Kana Asakura? Same situation with Ayaka Hamasaki. They've already fought each other. I think it's going to be like a rematch no matter what. So one of the things that I have been suggesting to the team is that why not we do a round robin tournament throughout the year? We know who the players are, and we can't introduce new talent. Why not create a little round robin tournament where they all fight each other? And it's not like the PFL system, but it is kind of. I guess it is. But when you already know what talent you have and you can't add any more in there, might as well turn it into a point system where you determine the annual winner of that division. That way, these fighters can constantly fight, and they know who they're fighting throughout the year. And it's just an idea, but it's just one of those things where you have to work with what you're given, right? But yeah, so same situation with Kana Asakura. With the borders closed, it's just super hard to bring in new international talent, and if we have to focus on domestic opponents, the names are all going to be the same, or a complete mismatch.
It is a situation that is so hard to manage, right? Because they fought each other so much, and everything's a rematch. And yeah, man, it's Shingo's in a difficult position with these fighters right now. But Drake, Fantasyland, what is the matchup for Kana Asakura?
Jeez, I mean, that one's tougher because of the fact that at least we have one kind of fresh one with Reina and Ayaka having not fought, but Reina's even fought Kana twice already. They've already fought twice. So, boy, I don't know, man. It's tougher for Kana, and obviously we're speaking what would be next with her and Rizin, but I think it would probably be a more realistic thing maybe if you were to send her against Zapatella for the next title defense. Obviously that would be a rematch too, right? They've already fought, so it's like Kana's racking up fights against everybody so far. Oh boy, I don't know, man. I think right now, if you were just to look at it, I guess that Miyu rematch, since Miyu did beat her actually, so it's maybe more interesting in that way, seeing what has happened kind of since that first fight and how kind of dominant it was for Miyu. I think that's the one I'd probably like most, and nobody's quite jumping out. Yeah, man, it's really tough in this current climate. So I guess I'd go with the Miyu rematch, but in a perfect fantasy land and not specifically in Rizin, I say maybe send her over for that Zapatella rematch.
I wish Japan and Korea would create a bubble. You know what I mean? And there's a few atomweights in Korea that could possibly go over the Rizin and fight. You know what I mean? I wish they would create a small bubble and go back and forth. That I could go back and forth. You know,
selfish.
I'm being selfish, but I think that opens up, some fighters to go over and compete. And there's a couple. You know what I mean? Road just announced the atomweight vacant, title fight versus Park, and that's also a rematch. Even the Korean girls are fighting each other again and again. So it's not a bad situation, but it's a situation where it's difficult to manage because it's like there's nothing fresh, right? So we'll see what happens. The next question, Shingo, is it's about the deep what is it, Grand Prix, the Deep Jewels Grand Prix, the Atomweight Grand Prix. Are you watching that closely just to see like, okay, maybe we could see what happens? Because you guys have a great relationship with Deep.
Yeah, we do. Definitely. But I think I don't want to spoil it for the true person who's following this Atomweight Grand Prix. So I'm going to pass this question over to Drake. Okay. He's going to have the better assessment than I do.
All right. Now with this is me before Drake talks. I want to say, I say the winner fights Kana Sakura, man.
Yeah. I mean, they could. That'd be better than a title shot. And I think no matter who wins, I just think there's multiple people who could come out of this and go to Rizin at some point. And I have broken this down a little bit. The tournament, I've been following it closely as it has gone on. Yeah, man. So right now we're sitting at the final four. And even in the final four, we do have a rematch in the semifinals, which is Siwoo Park out of South Korea taking on, I'm blanking on her name right now, which sucks. But then on the other side, there's Hikaru Aono versus Nisei. And Nisei lost in... That's a rematch too, because they fought in the first round. But Aya Murakami was originally in there, and I forget who it was that was supposed to take her on, but she got a bye. Oh, it was Sakura who fought in Rizin on the New Year's Eve show. What was that, Rizin 20 last year's, or no, 26? I'm getting all mixed up now. And she missed weight and yada yada. She missed weight again, so they took her out. Murakami gets the bye, but now Murakami gets sick, so she's out. Nisei comes back in, faces Aono again. Yeah, so that's good fun. But man, I think that if you're looking at this, Hikaru Aono, who is going out with dating Suto Watanabe, right? They're a couple, which is cool and all that. She's a very good wrestler, but that's about it still at this point. She doesn't quite have anything else to the arsenal just yet. Still very green, but a very solid wrestler. Gets you down, doesn't do too much damage. Then you got Siwoo Park in the mix already mentioned. She, I think, is probably going to win this one, and she's got plenty of experience. Trains with Sohee Ham as well. Has knocked out Aono. If you guys haven't seen that fight, go check that one out. For an atomweight, it's always crazy to see that kind of power, and she's got kickboxing experience too. Has taken on Rina Panchan. She's already beat, I believe, everybody also in the tournament. At least, I'm blanking on the name of who she's facing, but that was a fight that they had before the tournament started. Was a pretty good one, and I think that they're two that will have the most potential out of everybody right now. But for me, Siwoo Park, I think, is the one who stands out the most. And yeah, definitely check out everybody though in this tournament if you guys are curious about it. I think that in time, maybe depending on how long and how soon, it's going to be different for certain people, but definitely some future stars in there, I think.
One thing about Park is that I think she spent this whole year in Japan training and fighting. So it's not like she has to go back and forth. She's invested, in going over there to deep and
training at Crazy B, I think.
Yeah, she's been training. And I think that is going to be very helpful, because if you go to Team Mad, there's only one other girl, and it's Hamsari. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have different looks. You know what I mean? You can't just train with one person and expect to get better in different aspects of the game. It just doesn't happen, right? So I think she's gonna benefit extremely, and she's turned the corner, because I was at a point one time where I thought, man, this girl's never gonna become anything. I'll be honest with you.
But now bit of a slow start.
Yeah, and now she's like, okay, she's showing something. And I think going over to Japan and training over there with so many different girls, and at Crazy B with the knowledge that they have, it has benefited her extremely. And I think she's trained with like Miyu Yamamoto, a lot, and that's going to be good for her. So we'll see what happens with her with Park. I always support the Koreans, so don't worry. Shingo, this is another one. Sudario, man, I've spoke to him. He has a good story, or I don't know if it's a good story, but he has a good story of him and Ensign, Ensign taking him under the wing. And man, I think he's the guy that's like, he could be that heavyweight, man, for Japan, man. When's the last time we had a heavyweight from Japan that was just like a world beater?
Can't remember.
Exactly. So what do you think? What's next for him? Dylan wants to know.
I mean, Sudario, I think he's got the potential, tons of potential. And I'm going to give you a few reasons why. I already told Drake this, but Sudario, when you think of former sumo wrestlers making their transition into MMA, you don't really have a good image, right? There's not too much high expectations because of the past. But when you look at the former sumo wrestlers who made that transition, they've already had a fruitful career in sumo, all bruised up, injured, and they're at the end of their career trying to make some extra bucks jumping in MMA, right? But Sudario didn't do that. He's still only 23 years old. He didn't even get started in his sumo career. So he's got that body, the physique, the size, the strength, athleticism, everything it takes to be an MMA heavyweight fighter. He's got it all. And now he's learning striking at a very young age, early stage of his career. And he's got nothing but potential. So I honestly think that this may be saying too much, but he can probably do good in the UFC heavyweight division someday, right? So he's got that much potential. So with that being said, what's next for Cesario? We want to keep him busy. We want to get him more experience as much as possible. But again, the COVID situation where we can't bring in, I'm not going to say legitimate competition, but like more like MMA fighters for him to build off of, right? There's not too many Japanese heavyweight fighters in Japan. So, obviously we have to go out and reach out to pro wrestlers, and, like Mino Man was another option. But yeah, this whole lockdown or like the internet borders shut down is definitely, it's hitting us hard for Cesario as well. But hopefully, if things turn out right, we might be able to see him in the very near future.
That's great, man. Hey, we hit the 90-minute mark, and now it's time to shut the doors on the live chat. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. All the questions were really good. If we didn't get to your questions, maybe we'll get to them next week. I don't know. Shingo, thank you, man, so much for doing this, because it's very rare to see someone in your position coming on and doing a live chat. Not just, interviews and live chat, completely different things, right? Anything could happen during a live chat. An interview, a little bit more controlled environment, right? And I appreciate you coming on. Drake, always, I think you're the most visited guest of this show, and which is great because you're very knowledgeable and you have a mind like Benjamin Buttons. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but
I'll
it is.
Take it.
Yeah. More like the guy on what is it? Goodwill. You're like Goodwill Hunting. Okay.
There we
go. You're the Goodwill Hunting of MMA. Anyways, everybody, thank you so much. If you're watching the replay, leave the comments on the bottom and share, like, and all of that. And we'll see you next week. I'll have another 2